I remember for Vegreville.
Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville.
Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville.
Thank you very
much,
Mr. Speaker. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the Boundary Commission and its final report, and just a little bit about the interim report. The way that the constituency of Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville looks right now is I'll describe it to you. There are 12 municipalities, including villages, towns, and cities. There are 4 county municipalities. There are more than 10 agriculture societies. There are more than 20 schools. There are 7 high schools, which means 7 high school grads, 7 high school awards nights. There are schools across the constituency, which is sometimes a lot of fun because you get to do read-in week all across rural Alberta. Because there are so many municipalities, there are 3 Legion. Sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? Just legions? Yeah. Legion branches. Thank you. So everything is in rural Alberta. It has an exponential factor. Each municipality has lodges, libraries, elk clubs, lions clubs, fish and game associations, egg service boards, boys and girls clubs. Every summer is a tour of rodeos, parades, ag days. All year it's pierogi dinners, steak fries, fish fries. I probably go to 100 hot dog fundraisers a year. The same when it comes to pancake breakfast, because this is how a lot of fundraising is done in small municipalities. Seniors drop-in centers, fire departments, both hired and volunteer, EMS services, junior trap shoots that take place in different rural areas. There are cemetery blessings that take place in many of these communities. There are rotating church services all across. It's a really, really diverse way of life. Anyone that thinks that it is sleepy in rural Alberta is quite mistaken. It is a non-stop way of being able to represent a constituency. And I have to say that I'm just going to read a little bit out of the final report here and just commentary on a few things that are mentioned here. So the first line, it's recommended that the boundaries of the electoral division be shown on map 62, and calls it, of course, Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville, which is nice because in the interim report, Vegreville had been dropped, and it was a drawing that pulled in St. Paul north in from the river, which made no sense. The commission had been asked to pull together constituencies that were based on shared interests, and what that did was it pulled St. Paul away from its shadow communities and families and people and business dealings, and it made no sense. We went to the commission in the fall, or I guess it was in late summer, and it was what everyone said. And I love St. Paul. It's a great place. I love to visit it, but it makes no sense to be pulled in away from its communities of shared interests from above the river. And so it's tough to argue against pulling some people in, but sometimes you have to look at what that bigger picture is. And I made sure that I spoke to the County of St. Paul and the Town of St. Paul before I argued against those communities being included in that new redraw, and they felt the exact same way, that it just didn't make any sense. And also the name Vegreville being pulled, as was mentioned earlier, it's 6,000 people, which may not seem like a lot, but it is currently the second largest municipality in the constituency, and to make no mention of why this community was being moved between constituencies, why there was a seemingly no reason to mention 6,000 people being moved made absolutely no sense, and it added insult to injury in a year that has been devastating with the continued moving forward of the closure of a federal government center there that does case processing for refugee citizenship and claims, immigration claims, citizenship, and refugee claims. It is the worst man-made disaster in a generation, and they didn't even deserve a mention in the report. So I'll go on, and it talks about the variance. The new variance of population would be 11% above the provincial average. And as much as I understand that it is a real challenge across the province to try and find an ability to balance populations and figure out how that works, because once you change one, an east-west, north or south boundary, it has a knock-on effect across the province. And so I understand that that's a challenge, but when you pull it 11% above, and in the report it says it's justified because the growth is expected to drop, it is very difficult to have a report that sounds like it is counting on rural areas to depopulate. And so I find that very, very troubling. The Commission was told that the average age of residents in parts of the electoral vision are well above that of other Albertans. That is absolutely true. There are municipalities that are not having new families the same way as they once were. It's difficult to move away from your community sometimes because you don't have the same socioeconomic means as other families. And so we have communities that do continue to age, and it brings with it a lot of needs, a lot of one-on-one needs that these people have, where they need to come into an office and be provided a service. And so knowing that there are different challenges when it comes to growing, booming young populations, as I have seen in Fort Saskatchewan with an incredibly young average population, there are other needs on the other side of the spectrum when you're talking about aging populations. So I just wanted to address that. I am glad to see that the request of counties to be kept whole was brought more together, not completely together, but brought more together in some cases. The new boundaries of this constituency pull Minburn together, pull Two Hills in, keeps Lamont whole, and so I appreciate that work. But it talks about a public concern of travel distance. Absolutely, the interim report, they wanted a constituency that went from Fort Saskatchewan all the way to Saskatchewan. And so that makes it really difficult to know that you are putting someone on a highway, potentially in the middle of winter, to come to your office because they don't have the same connectivity that people in urban areas enjoy. Part of the interim report was talking about internet connectivity and said, we're in a changing dynamic of having more people online, more people able to access offices through email. Well, that's really nice if you have connectivity. But in the report itself, it says that they're hoping that everyone gets connectivity by 2026. And so we would be changing these boundaries, knowing full well that we are hoping for some distant date in which we would have more farms, more rural municipalities connected into our offices, into our internet. So that was also quite frustrating to hear. But there are are some very good things with this. Like I said, it keeps some of the counties whole. It focuses on the Highway 16 corridor as being more taken in, because those are areas, municipalities of shared interests. I know that representing Fort Saskatchewan and getting to know so many of the families there, and getting to know families in Vegreville and around Strathcona County, that people live, work, and play between those communities, very much so. They live in Vegreville and work in Fort Saskatchewan. They live in Fort Saskatchewan and work in Vegreville. It's a very, very fluid area where people travel and are connected. And when people move and sell their farm, it is often one of those communities that they choose a home to retire in. And so the families that I meet in places like Fort Saskatchewan, they have really deep roots, very recent roots, to farming communities that are just outside in the region. It was said earlier, and it is quite true, that with all of these events and places that you are graciously invited to, that your attendance is appreciated, but your absence is noted. And that's because you are the only representative for your constituency. You don't have the same ability to be able to call on your neighbor to come and fill in for you if you can't be there. And truth be told, they often don't want to see someone else. They want to see you. You are their connection to the government, to the legislature. You are their voice. And so I absolutely love the constituency that I have the privilege of representing. You know, it's big. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of municipalities, and there's a lot to do. But I am privileged that the picture of what my position affords me the opportunity to get to know so many incredible people doing so many incredible things all of the time is just second to none. And so I don't begrudge the growth in the area or the growth in the population. It will have its own set of challenges, but I absolutely support the changes to this constituency, and I know that there was a lot of work put in to this report, and so I will be supporting this bill, this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any questions to the member from